What's up, guys, and welcome to today's episode. My name is Christian with Idaho Dual Sport. Today I'm going to be talking about the FE501 and why I decided to buy it. Alright guys, so I sold the Sherco. Did not come easy, but I did sell it to a close friend, so I did soften the pain a little bit. Ultimately, I found this deal on Marketplace and it was too good to pass up. I know it seems crazy to sell a Sherco 250 two-stroke and to buy a 500cc Enduro bike, but ultimately this came down to the choice of the type of riding I'm doing and the versatility I was seeking to fill. Now, honestly, I really wasn't in the market to be buying a new bike. I was perfectly content having the Sherco and the DRZ, and in no way, shape, or form was I out looking to purchase a bike. But we all know how Facebook Marketplace works, and this was a deal I could not pass up. This was a 2020 one owner with 774 miles. It was in amazing condition, as you can see in this video, with super clean upgrades. Really, it was practical for my use. I wanted a high-performance off-road dominant dual sport, which was going to bridge the gap from the DRZ to allow me to ride a little bit more aggressive off-road. The DRZ is fine, it's great, it does a lot of things, but it's not great when it comes to off-road, and I've been very transparent about that, as has any other DRZ owner in the history of mankind. I really like the 501's ability to ride in varying terrain, depending on how you set it up. You can really race desert in this thing. I'm pretty sure there's guys that are running GNCC on this platform, as well as Chris Birch has done Erzberg Rodeo on his 500. So depending on how you set this bike up, it can really tackle a lot of different obstacles in one platform, and I love that about the 500. Now, a lot of people think, well, now you just have two dual sports, and while that is true, they are on varying ends of the spectrum. I already have a DRZ for light adventure style dual sporting that allows me to do 200 to 400 mile days. I could probably push it, but it'd be a little bit painful. However, the DRZ is geared towards doing stuff where I'm going to be tackling long road miles, doing things that are going to require a lot of seat time that is not going to be in some challenging off-road terrain. The 501, on the other hand, is going to allow me to ride a lot more of the single track, the technical stuff, as well as ride a lot more aggressively in terrain with a bike that's almost 100 pounds lighter with double the power. The bike came with very clean and practical upgrades such as the Cycler hand guards, which I put on all of my bikes, the FMF PC4 slip-on, the Enduro Engineering skid plate, as well as the VE33S rear and the Dunlop AT81 gummy on the front. I was also very excited to know that this bike already came with the 12-tooth front sprocket, as that was going to be the very first thing I swapped out from the factory 14-tooth front sprocket. I had a vision for this bike as soon as I purchased it, and it was very easy to find a lot of companies offering some great quality materials and products that would make that vision come true. So let's jump over to the bike, and I'm going to show you some of the upgrades I've made. I was really happy with the mods that the original owner had put on. It initially just came with the Cycler hand guards, which I would have put on myself because I put those on all my bikes. It came with the FMF PC4, which is a great pipe, one that I definitely would have chosen for, or at least had considered if I was to replace the stock pipe had it had it. It came with the Enduro Engineering Max skid plate, or I believe it's the Enduro skid plate, which has a little bit more coverage, which I'm not a huge fan of aluminum skid plates, but Enduro Engineering makes great products, and I'm happy to use this one for the foreseeable future. The IRC VE33S was on the rear and the Dunlop AT81 gummy front. Both are amazing tires for off-road, definitely not dual sport tires by any means, and they are not DOT rated. So we'll be replacing those eventually, but I'm going to try and get as much out of these as I can because they are phenomenal off-road tires. The original owner also had changed out the front sprocket to a 12-tooth. I believe it comes with a 14 or 15 tooth, which is just way too much for the trails. It's great for open country and the wide open desert, or even if you're using it on the street, but as soon as you start getting into the tight technical stuff, that 14, 15 tooth front is just way too much. So the 12 tooth was much appreciated and definitely changes the character of the power on this bike. For protection parts, let's start with the Bulletproof Designs components. I usually throw these on almost all of my bikes if they are available. Unfortunately, they usually only make parts for KTM, Husqvarna, and Gas. I was able to get some for the Sherco when I had it, and was very fortunate and happy with those parts, and so I continue to use them for this bike as well. I went ahead and put on the Radiator guards as they provide awesome side protection and act as a brace as well. Plus they just look great. Fit and finish is second to none. I've really been happy with them on the previous bikes. Secondly, I put on the rear disc and caliper protectors. Those have been awesome as well. They're very slimline, do a great job with protection, and really go along with the clean lines of the bike. Now on the front, I decided to go with the Acerbis front disc guard. I've just had great luck with this thing, and it seems to be the place where I usually get hung up the most, whether it's on a steep descent and I get caught up on a rock, or going through a rock section where I might be getting snagged. Aluminum just hangs up a lot more, and I like being able to slide through things a little bit easier with the plastic components that still protect really, really well on that front disc. Another small and simple upgrade is the Acerbis fork protectors, or the fork covers. I really don't know how much they do. They might be for looks more than anything, but I did scar the crap out of my YZ250X forks dropping them in a rock garden at one point, so ever since then I've put them on. Next up, we got the P3 pipe cover. Definitely a component you want to put on these 500s. They do run hot. That pipe is smoking hot once you start riding it for a bit, especially if you're riding slow stuff. P3 makes great stuff, and have used them on all of my pipes so far besides the DRZ. Next up, the Polysport clutch cover. I had actually initially purchased the ignition cover as well, but considering that the existing Enduro engineering mount covers half of the ignition, I decided not to put that one on. I do install these on most of my bikes as well, just because it's a basic insurance policy to keep you from getting punctures or smashed case covers on this trail. And then lastly is the Mosko heat shield, kind of mandatory when you're running Reckless or any saddlebags for that matter, and Mosko includes these with their Reckless kit anyway, so here it is. Now for the dual sport upgrades, let's start with the True North Moto dual sport kit. I was super stoked to see that they had an option to do this. I know there's a lot of harnesses out there that kind of piece things together, but Dan did an absolutely phenomenal job in making this plug and play and straightforward. It took me about an hour to install, and has pretty decent instructions through the video that he posted on YouTube. The control switch comes with the left and right turn signal, as well as your kill switch and your horn. All you have to do is engage your factory headlight switch, which sends power to the relay harness, which turns on everything for your dual sport kit. At that point, giving you the high-low switch selector on your headlight, which in my case, since I replaced the factory headlight, just gives me an on-off switch. The rear all-in-one assembly is awesome as well, because it keeps things from hanging out off the side where you're most prone to damage. It has a left and right turn signal as well integrated, as well as the brake pressure switch for your rear brake and front brake. So it gives you your running light, your brake light, as well as your left and right turn signals. Next up is the MotoMinded and Baja Designs headlight. This is an awesome upgrade for guys that are really going to be using this off-road, maybe in some dusty or dark conditions. But yeah, just an absolutely phenomenal piece. The stock headlight is pretty much worthless, and not a fan at all. This really increases your safety and your visibility at nighttime. The yellow bezel, or the shield that I put on there, definitely helps in the dusty conditions that we get out here in Idaho as well. I know there's a lot of upgrades out there. A lot of guys opt for the Ruby. There's the XL80, the Squadron Pro, but I believe this is rated around 3,200 lumens, and that has been absolutely plenty for me in all conditions. I'm not riding at a fast clip. I'm not desert racing. And the 3,200 lumens that this puts out comes out in a pattern that is much superior to the stock headlight, and really gives me enough visibility when I need it. The MotoMinded flex plate is another piece that I added to the Sherco that I swapped over to the Husqvarna. Just an awesome piece. I know there's also an Enduro plate that also looks great, but this one has just worked out really well for me. Last but not least, the double take Enduro mirrors. I ordered these when I ordered my MotoMinded headlight, and I haven't had to actually use double takes yet, because I've used trail mirrors on most of my bikes that were just kind of the zip tie to the bar type, and the DRZ factory mirrors are still on that bike. So far super happy with these. Very high quality, nothing really to it, straightforward, great attachment, fold down when you don't need them. What else could you ask for? Now getting into the functional upgrades. The Stout mount was one of my favorite upgrades that I have yet to do on any other bike, but it was one that I was eyeballing long before I purchased the FE501. It essentially turns your bars into a dash for bikes that do not have one. And the one on the FE501, which is the non-street model, has nothing but a plain little tachometer that shows you your mileage and your speed, and that's it. This thing has been awesome. You attach your phone to it, have your maps right there in front of you, and it also allows you to install a GPS if I choose to go that route down the road. The Trailbound Co bar bag gets a lot of attention. I've used this thing on also all my bikes and currently have 3 sitting in my garage, 2 installed and 1 from a previous bike. These things are very, very well made. They install easily. They hold as much as you need. I throw some spare bolts in here, a steel stick, my license and registration, any of the paperwork I need for the bike. Definitely throw some snacks in there, a couple small little wrenches for stuff that I keep on the cockpit, anything that I might need to adjust my quad lock or something on my phone. Usually we'll throw my phone in there if I'm not using it, as well as the dust cover that I put on my phone when I've got it running on the quad lock. The Mosko Moto Gnoblin was a recent upgrade that I'm so glad I finally pulled the trigger on. I previously was using the cleats that come with the kit, and as much as I thought that was convenient, this is way, way better. It allows you to hook up your bags in a much faster way and a much cleaner and slimline way that once you take them off does not have a bunch of catching points on the back of the bike. I do currently have a seat concept seat on order. We'll be picking that up within the next few weeks as it finishes up, but I definitely cannot wait to get rid of the stock seat on this Husky. Now let's talk about some of the things I love about the bike. First and foremost is the performance. I don't need to tell you much. You can get on YouTube and look up the 500s and find thousands, if not millions of videos about the 500 and the 501 platform. It's renowned worldwide and it's not by accident. Flat out, it's a great performing machine. Secondly, the power. The 510cc motor is intoxicating, flat out. It's linear, electric. You can ride it lazy, low in gear, or you can rip that thing wide open and be white-knuckled as all get out. It's a great motor with a ton of power and it seems to be bottomless. Next up, the aftermarket. We all know the KTM and Husqvarna aftermarket is second to none. This was not a part of my decision process, but it has been something that has been greatly appreciated as I've decided to build on this bike. The modification platform that the 500 offers is another strength that I really love about this bike. If I wanted to, I could really make it a trail machine, or I could make it a great supermoto, or I could make it a long traveling light ADV. Whatever I've wanted to do, this 501 offers a platform to do it on. That kind of ties into the next point about versatility, which I've mentioned a lot in this video, but I do find that the 500 platform just really ties together all the components of what you would want in a dual sport and a trail bike all together. Next up, the cockpit and ergonomics. I was actually surprised how much I enjoyed this bike the second I sat on it. It's very comfortable. The cockpit seems natural for me. Coming off a Sherco, that might not be a surprise, as the Sherco is very crammed even for somebody like me at 5'10". The balance was also something that I noticed was a strength right away. The second I sat on this bike and took it for a ride, I was able to notice how low the weight was carried, as well as how much it balanced at very, very slow speed, especially for a high horsepower bike. This was something that I really recognized as being a strength for being a trail dominant bike, and it was greatly appreciated on the test ride I took before I decided to purchase it. Which brings me to my final point, the bike's weight. I believe it's around 240 to 245 pounds wet, which is perfect for the type of riding I'm doing. I don't need anything lighter, but I also don't want anything heavier. This bike carries weight very, very well, feels very central, very balanced and low carrying, so I'm very excited about that portion of the bike. Now the things I disliked, the vibrations. Oh my gosh. It kind of feels like those chairs in the mall that you put $1 into and it just vibrates and it's supposed to give you a massage, but it really just makes your eyes jiggle for like 15 minutes. Yeah, that's what this bike feels like. I know that's not a secret. A lot of the beta guys talk about that, and everybody who's ridden a KTM and then ridden a beta talks about how there's no vibration on their 500. Well, it is there, but it's something I'm willing to put up with, and it's something that I believe can be alleviated with a dampener, a stabilizer, and definitely a better seat. Secondly, yes, and ignore this because this has obviously come with the territory, and I was educated knowing this going into purchasing the bike, but it's the maintenance intervals. Roughly with the type of riding I'm doing, we're looking at about 1,000 miles of interval changes. That's mainly just going to be oil, but yeah, the air filter will get done in that time. Now, since I'm planning on using this bike for BDRs, 1,000 miles will be kind of give or take. There will probably be some trips that I do maybe 1,200 to 1,500 miles before doing an oil change. But if necessary, guess what? It's a Husqvarna. I can stop in almost any city across the country, find some decent oil or parts if need be. Again, the stock seat. It sucks. It's hard. I've never gotten on a stock seat that I liked besides the Sherco. And that was the first thing that I called. As soon as I got this bike home, I called Seat Concepts and placed an order, which should be getting here in the next 2 or 3 weeks or so. Lastly, and this is subjective because the bike really isn't bad in stock form, but the need for an ECU is one of the things that kept me away from KTM and Husqvarna for a while, especially on the 4-stroke side. The fact that the fueling needs addressed immediately is instantly a $1,000 purchase that you have to look into making on top of the purchase of the bike. Now, fortunately, since I got this bike for such a steal, not going to disclose the price, I was able to counter that into the cost of the build of the bike, and it made it worthwhile. However, when you're looking at these bikes, having to factor in another $1,000+ just to get the fueling right is definitely a turnoff. So what are my intentions for this bike? Well, let's start with the BDR, as I've mentioned in this video. Next year, I'm planning to do the OR BDR with my buddy Jeff. We're in the stages of planning that now. And from there on out, I'm planning to do something like one BDR a year, if not more. I'd also like to tackle the tour of Idaho as well as many of the other routes that are offered here in the state of Idaho. Again, I was looking for an off-road dominant dual sport. Having the DRZ, I wanted something that was really going to shine off-road. The DRZ survives, but it does not thrive. It's kind of like what everyone says. It's good at everything and it's great at nothing. As I mentioned before in this video, I wanted something that was going to be dominant off-road. The DRZ does it, but not great. The Sherco was phenomenal off-road, but it also was so far into the Enduro category that it didn't offer any of the dual sport features that I was looking to have in a dirt bike. This will likely be a bike that's used for 80-20 use, if not more. I'm looking to do about 90% off-road on the 501 and really keeping my pavement time to a minimum. A lot of people ask me, well, why did you replace your two-stroke with a 500 when you already have a DRZ 400? Again, two very different platforms that are being built for two different purposes. I'm going to be using the DRZ for a lot more light adventure style dual sporting, where I'm going to be using the 501 for pretty much predominantly aggressive off-road riding with the ability to connect trails on pavement. Lastly, I just plan on getting better on this bike. The 501 is confidence inspiring. It's not as intimidating as a lot of guys think. It's not 450 motocross type power. It really is linear, it's electric, and it's fun to ride. Whatever you choose to ride, it's got to be fun. If it's not fun, you're not going to ride it and you're not going to get better. Seat time is all that produces skill, and there's nothing that you can replace it with. So this bike, it's a blast. I fell in love with it. It was ear to ear the first time I rode it, and I plan on spending a lot more seat time on this bike, especially because it's street legal. It allows me time to get on the bike and go ride, period. That's why I love dual sporting. So last category, who is this bike for? I'm going to say anybody. You could put a 7-year-old rider who's got some experience on this bike and let him putt around in the low end of the gears on the trails, or you could give it to a young hooligan that's 18 years old and wants to go do wheelies down the street. This bike has so much versatility, there's really no end to what it can be used for. It's got very smooth, linear, bottomless power. There is top to bottom, no power spikes, no surges. There's nothing that this bike does that's going to surprise you. Whatever this hand does is exactly what's going to come out of that bike. I would feel comfortable putting my wife on this bike, even though it's got a lot of bark. The bite is expected because it comes from how much you are putting into the bike. Whatever you do with your right hand, it's exactly what's going to come out of the bike, and there's no surprises about that. Bigger beginner riders are also another option. If you're over 200 pounds, this might be a great option for you if you're looking to do leisurely riding. 50-inch trails, ATV trails, fire roads, or dual sporting, this bike is a great platform. It's super light. It's going to allow you to get some experience off-road on a bike that has perfect predictable power, but it's also going to prepare you for riding on something that might be a little bit more technical. It's a great starting point. I definitely don't think there's anything to shy away from if you're a beginner rider, but I would not recommend it for anybody under that 190 to 200 pound range, as it is a lot of bike. Anybody looking to ride 80% or more off-road, this bike's going to do it. It gives you that little bit of spectrum to where you can get into the wide open stuff and rip it, or you can get off-road and still ride the technical trails. Again, how you set that bike up is going to determine how practical that is for you. Desert riding and GNCC racing, this bike rips. Flat out, it just hauls. Lastly, it's for all you goons that like to do wheelies and endos and all that kind of crazy stunt work on the streets. The 500 platform's nuts. Now I know you guys are upgrading to the 701s and the big 690s and all that stuff, but the 500 weighs like 240 pounds and it's an absolute blast to ride. If I was 18, I'd probably throw a set of sumo wheels on there and go night riding with my homies. Really just wanted to give you guys a rundown on what I plan on doing with this bike and who I think it would benefit. I really think it's going to be a great addition to the DRZ as a dual sport, and I think it's going to cover a lot of ground that the DRZ cannot do very well. I hope this video is helpful for some of y'all, and I appreciate y'all tuning in. See you on the next one.